A Trinity passage might be a verse that someone says is definitely teaching that God is three parts. Do we have verses that actually say outright that God is made up of three parts? Maybe not so black and white in that way, but we have plenty of verses that mention the three persons of the Trinity in one verse. Of course, remember that the verse breakdowns are artificial. I don't think Paul actually sectioned his letter off into chapters and verses. Maybe he had paragraphs. I'm not quite certain. I know biblical Greek well enough to say that there are definitely chapter breaks in the original manuscripts. Most of the original manuscripts that I've seen in Hebrew and in Greek don't even contain chapter or sentence breaks. It's just like one long running sentence. That's what it appears to be in my eyes, where there's no break between even, there's no punctuation where I can detect where one verse ends and where another picks up. You just have to tell from, you really have to be an expert to catch that. So I'm really thankful for the translators who break down the original manuscripts into chapters and verses. But here we have an example where the translators broke this particular verse in such a way that Paul is mentioning God, the Father, right? Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. He mentions all three persons of the Trinity. So this doesn't mean it's a Trinity proof text. It just means it's at least a triadic passage. But notice again, Paul doesn't say that it is the Holy Spirit that's in us until he gets to the very end of the verse. So I want to understand that no one's speaking in the Spirit of God. He says in the first part of the verse, and then at the end of the verse he says the Holy Spirit, which, if the Unitarian wants to argue that the Spirit of God is exclusively God's personal spirit, not a third person, then what the Unitarian is saying is that the Holy Spirit used in the last part of the passage must be another name for the first person of the Trinity. That's what must be going on if God isn't made up of three persons, because Paul mentions Spirit of God in the first half of the verse, and in the last half he mentions Holy Spirit. And if your particular take on the Bible is that there are not three persons, well then I suppose you must come to the conclusion that Spirit of God is parallel to Holy Spirit. That's my take. However, again, I'm a Trinitarian, and I believe that Paul doesn't teach us that the Spirit of God, first person, is just another word for Holy Spirit in third person, the third person in the last half. I think Paul understands that God is complex, and that it is one God, there is one God, and yet God is complex, and that God, being pure spirit, also has a third person. Paul probably wouldn't use the word person there. I don't think he does. I've never seen it. But nevertheless, Holy Spirit, there is a third person of the Trinity. We've articulated that. I know people accuse Trinitarians of adding words that aren't in the Bible. Let's not go down that ridiculous argument path, because there are plenty of descriptions of God that aren't found in the Bible, yet we know them to be true and accurate descriptions of God based on deductional reasoning. And so we supply modern descriptions where the Bible is absent. Even the word Trinity is not found in the Bible, but then again, neither is the word unity in the sense that the Unitarians are using it. So let's continue in this endeavor. Let's read a few more of these verses.